If you live in Washington State, this is going to be one of the biggest scandals you will see in your lifetime, because Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson admits to withholding over 100,000 records in a lawsuit about the developmentally disabled. There were allegations of abuse, of neglect, and this man knew about it and he covered it up because he didn't want the state to face liability. This happened in state-funded facilities. And we find out that according to recent court filings from April the 11th, signed by King County Superior Court Judge Michael Ryan, a discovery master has been assigned so that they can manage discovery issues in the case, so they can keep track of all the evidence and make sure that Bob Ferguson and the governor here isn't lying and covering up things. And so there were allegations of abuse, neglect, and a failure to provide adequate case management for people who were developmentally disabled. And we also find out from those exact same court filings that there was some covering up that was going on by Bob Ferguson and the Washington State Attorney General's office. And that same judge already sanctioned Bob Ferguson and the entirety of the Washington State Attorney General's office for not turning over records. And now we find out that Bob Ferguson admitted that he found 100,000 more pages, 100,000 more records that were not turned over from people who were disabled, people who had disabilities, who were neglected, abused. You had page after page after page that they somehow just found, even though a judge, a superior court judge in this state, told them to turn it over. Why in the world did it take so long to get those records? Well, for every page out there, you got a potential lawsuit. That's why. And we know that the Washington State Attorney General's office and also the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services were in the wrong because a judge has ordered them to pay $200,000 in sanctions. And on top of that, we find evidence that a Washington State Department of Social and Health Services employee made fun of the plaintiff and even made fun of all the cases of abuse and neglect. And that Bob Ferguson was well aware this interaction happened, and he did nothing about it. And this is why they passed that assault weapons ban, because if you knew about this, let me ask you a question. If you knew this was going to be as bad as it was going to be, wouldn't you pass one out of fear? Because you knew the people were going to be pretty pissed off? And it's really strange how Jay Inslee doesn't want to be governor anymore all of a sudden. Very interesting.